Hello and welcome to the World Forest Report with Dean Val here and Dean Kevin from the UK. Today we're having a little technical trouble here, I am at least, so I won't be on video, but I'd like to share something that I heard on the Mike Adams Health Ranger report. And this is from a couple months ago, but it's kind of interesting. The solutions for the supposed CO2 problem we have is too much CO2 in the air, whereas actually it's just barely enough to keep the planet alive, according to some sources, 400 parts per million, according to some sources, which is just barely, enough. But they want to go carbon neutral. So one of the solutions here is to cut down more trees, which sounds counterproductive because they sequester carbon, the trees do, and that's what they feed off of. But let's listen to the little show here and see what they say about their reasoning for cutting down more trees.
The timber industry says it has a partial solution for climate change. Here it is: cut down more trees. No surprise, environmentalists are just a little bit skeptical. As part of our year-long series, Climate Connections with National Geographic, NPR's Jeff Brady takes a closer look.
Could this really be the sound of reducing greenhouse gases? The timber industry says it can reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by doing what it's always done.
Using a chainsaw to improve the health of these forest ecosystems is a viable tool.
Chris West is with the American Forest Resource Council. He says all those overgrown forests that burned last summer released tons of carbon dioxide. But he says if timber companies had gotten there first, loggers would have thinned the trees and the forest might not have burned.
To just let Mother Nature have her way with these ecosystems is not going to help us as we try and deal with the issue of climate change.
So, West says, why not give Mother Nature a hand by removing much of that wood and using it to build houses? Bruce Lipke says those homes could be like a big carbon savings account. He's a researcher at the University of Washington College of Forest Resources.
That carbon in the products gets stored for a long period of time, and ultimately there's more carbon stored in the products in the buildings than there is in the forest.
New trees are planted in the cut forest, starting the process all over. And after each rotation, Lipke says a little more carbon goes into the savings account. The timber industry hopes this idea will convince Congress that it should be rewarded for reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Right now, members of Congress are developing a carbon trading system. It'll allow polluters to offset their emissions by buying credits from those who reduce greenhouse gases. The timber industry wants to make money selling those credits. Environmentalists raise a collective eyebrow anytime the timber industry comes up with an argument for cutting more trees. Ann Ingerson is with the Wilderness Society.
Big old forests are tremendous carbon storers, and they're doing a great service for us, and we don't want to be tinkering with them without quite understanding how the whole cycle works.
Ingerson says more research is needed in pretty much every area of forestry at issue here, and she says lost in this whole debate is the fact that the U.S. is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the world. Ingerson says rather than looking for ways to offset the country's emissions, why not burn less fossil fuel?
In the long run, what we really need to focus on is handling less material, moving less stuff around, moving ourselves around less, and becoming more efficient in the way we run our economy.
But there are going to be more houses built, and Bruce Lipke at the University of Washington says the world's climate would benefit if they were constructed of wood.
When you use wood, you're basically using it instead of some other material.
Usually concrete or steel.
Both of them are much more fossil intensive. Therefore, anytime you use those materials, you're contributing large carbon emissions to the atmosphere.
But most homeowners don't know that, and in recent years, concrete has stolen market share from wood. Nearly 1 in 5 new homes is concrete, thanks in part to advertising.
A log cabin in the woods may look romantic and something out of a fairy tale, but it's darn right impractical.
This promotional video touts the benefits of concrete and points out all the problems with wood, like termites and dry rot.
But there is a smarter solution to avoid these problems: a concrete home.
These home builders also are quick to mention no trees are cut down for a concrete home. But research shows that building a concrete house consumes more energy than a wood one. That means more greenhouse gases. Concrete does redeem itself slightly once a building is demolished, says Martha Van Giem. She's a structural engineer in the concrete industry.
Wood will decompose and emit CO2, whereas the concrete, when it's ground up at the end of its life cycle and used as a recycled material, it's absorbing CO2.
But when it comes to overall carbon dioxide emissions, wood houses are the winner. The question now is whether Congress will include the timber industry and their aggressively managed forests in the carbon trading program, or will Congress limit the program to forests that are mostly off-limits to loggers? Jeff Brady, NPR News, Denver.
You can find out a lot more on climate change at our website, npr.org/climateconnections.
So the thing is, they control the narrative, they control the problem, they have the solution, whereas people left to their own devices without government interference would use common sense to deal with the challenges we have with the environment, which, by the way, is being destroyed by the controllers, but left to our own devices. If people were self-sufficient and use their common sense and use their ingenuity, hempcrete, they mention concrete here. Hempcrete, they don't even mention that. Hemp is a great resource for building and other materials, textiles, etc. If they control the narrative, they create the problem, they have the solution. It's all in their ballpark. So people are caught up in this, and I'm just playing this just to show how kind of ridiculous it is to, their solution is to cut down trees to offset this made up problem that there's too much CO2 in the air, which again, let me repeat, according to many scientists, we just barely have enough CO2 in the atmosphere, which is very little to support the planet and organisms here that feed off of it. There's just a lot of discussion going on that's basically from the mainstream media that's not necessary even to listen to. Do your own research. There's many people that are doing, even just on Facebook, all the people that are coming up with innovative ways to heat their houses, use solar, magnetism, all kinds of ways, geothermal, to deal with heating, cooling, food, etc. So be creative and do your own thing, and be wary of the authorities telling you this and that. So that's basically my share today, Kevin. If you have any comments, I'll give it over to you and go ahead with your segment. Thank you.
Yeah, in regards to house heating, I thought it was very interesting, some of the information that an individual called Michael Tedinger discovered. He is an African individual, and I think he either created or is very much involved in the Ubuntu, if I pronounce that correct, movement, which is the establishing of self-sufficient communities in Africa. And he also has a number of sort of side projects. He's very interested in, I think, cryptozoology. He is one of the individuals who has been unearthing a lot of giant remains in Africa, finding these giant bones, which rather reveal that there were indeed giants walking on the planet not so long ago, and their remains seem to be scattered across Africa. And he also did a lot of research which indicated that the population of Africa was far greater than we were led to believe, because he's found lots of remains with which show the sort of the remnants of structures and abodes. But they also, what he found particularly of interest in regards to energy and houses, was that he found the remnants or the foundation stones of these buildings were of a certain geometrical design which had them self-generating energy. And it seemed that these are so-called primitive Africans from centuries ago seemed to not be quite so primitive, in that they had determined that certain geometrical shapes actually tune in, it would seem, with earth energies and then generate heat. And it seemed that all these remains, these remnants of these old houses, which, I mean, he found countless numbers of them, millions scattered across Africa. And he said they're all of the same geometrical design. And when they went in there with technology which could measure thermal energies and various energies and such, they actually thought at first when they were entering these buildings they were on active volcanoes because the energy was so great. But as he was saying, it's they seem to have expansive knowledge of geometry and how it can tune in with earth energies and generate heat. And so he said these houses were self-generating heat-wise, and so in regards to sort of self-sufficiency and finding ingenious ways of generating energy, I mean, a lot of the knowledge in regards to this has been lost, the utilising of earth energies, and it does seem that according to the very design of the geometry of the house can dictate the extent to which energy can be literally pulled from the earth. The earth energy is utilised, and of course this information is probably not necessarily lost. It's probably more so just concealed, so that we have to pay our rather extortionist bills and such. The following information was sourced from the site whatwarming.com, written by Clifford A. Dunlop, and titled The Demonizing of Carbon Dioxide, dated the 4th of September 2021. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is under attack throughout the world today through a constant onslaught of dire messages being thrown at the public by politicians, influencers, industry giants, media outlets, tribal believers, science communities, government organisations. We are being told that we must believe that carbon dioxide is causing destructive climate change that will eventually destroy our societies and eliminate human life. Is it not acceptable to debate this concept? And all attempts to do so are squashed. Why? We are being told that we must stop burning fossil fuels of all kinds to stop the growth of carbon dioxide in our atmospheres. We are encouraged to do so by pricing carbon dioxide creation, such as by our use of fossil fuels through various forms of federal and provincial carbon taxes. We are being encouraged to support new industries, such as carbon dioxide capture and sequestration, so that excess CO2 can be removed from the air and hidden away underground where it cannot cause further damage. There is a still heated debate raging between proponents of the carbon dioxide-based global warming climate change scenario versus those who discount this theory and point to natural sources of climate change, such as the sun, that massive ball of nuclear fire that is 330,000 times the size of Earth and cycles through high and low periods of energy output. Unfortunately, the winner of this debate is not judged by scientific merit or scientific method, but rather by obtaining consensus of the masses as to which side presents the best argument, i.e., he who has the most scientists on their side wins. What's the score? I hate to say it, but because of the strength of media and the biased power structure our world operates under, the alarmists have essentially won the argument over the deniers for the hearts and minds of the general populace. En masse, we now support the demands of government to pay for burning fossil fuels based on how much carbon dioxide we generate. En masse, we also quickly blame the invisible poison that gives us personal grief through inconveniencing us with practically every weather phenomenon we might experience. Please note that just because the alarmists have won, it does not mean they are right. They may have simply shouted their way into a dominance over the non-believers and flex the power that brings. Also, please note that, although invisible to the general public through media manipulation, there is indeed a scientific argument ongoing about this CO2-driven warming phenomenon we have supposedly caused. If it were an unbiased argument, as it should be in the scientific world, carbon dioxide would almost certainly be exonerated as the culprit behind climate change, and natural processes would be demonstrated to be the true reasons we have hot and cold seasons with varying degrees of weather extremes we label climate change. The evidence is there, but it won't be considered by expert groups such as the IPCC or government-funded research institutions that receive grants to strengthen the global warming scenarios. So the question is, why do we have to demonize carbon dioxide? Why do we have to accept that it does all these bad things? Why must we feel shame for using fuels that generate carbon dioxide as they burn? Why must we pay extra for those fuels and subsidise fuels, electricity by wind and solar, that do not? Why all the pressure from our leaders to conform? What do they have to gain from it anyway? Money. That's why. Why would the Icelandic people, who live next to one of the world's largest active volcanoes, create a processing plant that uses massive fans to suck air through cells that remove the carbon dioxide and then transport that carbon dioxide to the depths of the underground, never to be seen again? For the good of mankind? Not likely. Why would billionaires like Bill Gates support and own similar projects, such as the one in Squamish, BC, that does the same thing? He says he feels guilty about the amount of CO2 his industries produce, and wants to offset that by removing CO2 from the air to compensate for that expulsion. He does this by buying carbon credits that are subtracted from his output tonnage and allows the balance sheet to, well, balance. COP26 started to show just how greedy and corrupt the world is, best described in the following article. The story really starts to unfold when the subject of compensation for third world or developing countries comes up. The demand for trillions of dollars to compensate for the damage developed countries have caused is nothing short of extortion. But hey, what the hell? Give it a shot, and we might just fall for it. The problem is, what if carbon dioxide actually doesn't cause global warming? Why are we making all this effort to remove carbon dioxide if it doesn't do anything bad after all? Why pay for it with our usage dollars or tax dollars or carbon credits? In the end, the public pays. It always does, one way or the other. We're told that we should do so willingly to save the planet. But what if we find out that this is nothing more than a scheme to create new industries that pay their founders billions? Will the new green industry of the future, based on shame and guilt and regulation and carbon capturing, be beneficial, or will it lower our standards while enriching those at the top? If CO2 is nothing more than an innocuous gas, then why is the push to cease drilling for oil not also extended to such materials as lithium that scar our landscapes, i.e. removal of real pollutants such as sulfur, not carbon dioxide? The idea seems to be demonize carbon dioxide, scare everybody, provide solutions to our problems that threaten our existence, and rake in the cash. Would we support the following if we didn't believe CO2 was bad? 1. Paying carbon taxes based on how much fossil fuels we burn. 2. Paying for massive research to confirm CO2 is a gas causing climate change. 3. Not allowing scientific debate on the greenhouse effect scenario. 4. Allocating research funds to be according to gospel, not as search for truth. 5. Accepting the output of the UN-based IPCC as gospel. 6. Sucking air through fans and pumping the CO2 collected back into the ground. 7. Ignoring warnings of environmental destruction by lithium mining. 8. Not questioning media when they blame weather on CO2. 9. Listening to Greta. 10. Accepting the Great Reset and the new economy as something to strive for. 11. Allowing lockdowns and quarantines based on authority rather than facts. 12. Idolizing billionaire wealth while accepting lower living standards for ourselves. 13. Polarizing our society and politics over concepts such as global warming. 13. Ignoring the sun. 14. Allowing the elite to treat the masses like crap. Ask yourself what would happen to the aforementioned list if we just stopped believing that carbon dioxide caused global warming, along with all the incidents of weather that it supposedly is responsible for. How many of those points listed above would just disappear? Who would be affected, especially financially, if we just stopped believing, and worse yet, supporting those CO2-driven actions they have invested in? What would we find if we just followed the money?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, just stop screwing with stuff. Judy Mikovits, well-known health doctor, she just says, if we stop wearing the mask, stop giving shots, basically everything will go back to normal, So here too, with the environment, if people just stop messing with it, let's see what would happen. Of course, it's not going to happen, but it's very simple. Just stop screwing with stuff, the mad scientists, etc. And I want to go back to the little clip I played too with the forest industry claiming that cutting down trees would help the CO2 problem, which there is none, like you said, really, in the article. It's the live trees that sequester the CO2, and then when they die, they emit CO2, and that's what they're talking about. There's too many trees that are dying, and it creates too much CO2 in the atmosphere. And they claim, put them in caves, if we bury these dead trees, different things, just really nonsensical kind of solutions. But anyway, it's just keep your hands off. Just do what makes sense, and everything could go back to normal. But as it is, people are agreeing to this nonsense that's going around. So that's what we have to deal with now.
Well, it just shows you the crazies are running things. That's all it shows you. They turned it over to the lunatics, and they got all their lunatic ideas. You all know what it's about. It's this make everything bad.
Nothing's for benefit. It's everything's for destruction and control. So, yeah, we live in a insane asylum here. Criminal and insane are running the place. So we see
Another
that.
thing, Mike Adams, I just put an article they put on that there's 100,000 more deaths per month. That's just they're just killing everybody off they can. So that's all. You're just going to have to just live with it and try to stay out of the mess. I don't know. I guess just isolate yourself like they used to do in the old days. I don't know how else to get around it. They're just burning everything down.
I'm going to say just on the figures that were just listed that I have pretty strong reservations about believing these figures, and the fact that they're able to come up with them so quickly is also very sounding much more like an agenda of detail that they're providing an ongoing report that is in keeping with what they're doing. So face value, I don't think so. Anyway, I just wanted to go with Kevin on the article, and I have some confusions, let's say, which Val, you explained it, that the guy's point of view was neutral in the sense that he's pointing at something along the lines of don't fool with Mother Nature, we'd be much better off, and possibly correct. But the article is confusing to me, and this view that's been shared like that has confusions because, well, one of the first ones that stands out was about the oil and gas industry and the coal, and that we should just let them go on their path, and as well. And that's confusing to me because that doesn't seem like the best environmental solution. Let them continue the slavery of the coal mines and the harm not only to people but to the environment and the mountains and the nature of the areas where they get the mines are built and where they get the products from. Oil, same thing. It sounded like part of his point of view was to just let that should just continue, and we shouldn't be up in arms about that. And in a sense, the article made it sound that we should also think that coal, that is solar and wind, and all these are just money making, which you definitely have a point about that. I see that right here where I live. There's 5 solar farms. It's definitely for making money. We don't really benefit from extra power or lower bills. And they're definitely in control of that industry, and it's being promoted for their financial gain of the top end. Absolutely. So that's the issue, and where my confusion is also, because to share this, I think many people would take the position that the reading was supporting something that would be environmentally progressive. In a way, things that I feel are not, but that's my point of view, of course. So again, it's just our angle of intent. And for all of us who are looking at this from the position of wholeness, that I get. But we're talking about very few people are looking at it from what I think is an inverse posture of wholeness, as opposed to an extroverse, outer universe, outer world, and personal, literal concept point of view. We're here, we're looking out at the universe, the universe is pouring dangerous light into our environment, and or the universe is our friend with this great void of space all around us, and we need to find out what the universe really, all the good, and go mine the other planets and all that stuff, which that outer verse viewpoint is holding to. And so yeah, I'm in the middle somewhere, let's say, or if I'm going personal, yeah, I'm in a central, and I'm watching a cat that we have visiting here is kind of an invader wanting to be fed, kind of stalking on one of our other cats right now while we talk. So I guess it's metaphoric,
Tesla developed a system to make electricity out of nothing. You put like 8 or 10 plates together, and they're made out of different forms of metal, and it creates energy, free energy. Now that's clean compared to oil and gas, but oil and gas, if it's that bad, pretty clean right now. And it depends on who's making the statistics and who's running the damn thing. So it's, in my estimation, it's just all made up a bunch of bull. So all of this, these solar cells that take to manufacture, and the manufacture of the metals and all the other things that go into it involves the oil companies. You need oil to manufacture all these things for the free energy, or the energy that you think you're getting for free, which you're not.
That's correct, Ronald. Thank you for that. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And the oil industry, Duke Industry, is the one doing the solar panels here. And there's a new factory complex or whatever that's right on the major power line. There's 3 of them going out of here north and 1 going south out of this county to the rest of Florida, Georgia, and the southeast. But Duke Energy, the oil conglomerate, yes, very much at the very center of building this whole industry for their workers and their profit and so forth. Yeah. So
one of the things that JP Morgan said, if I can't put a meter on it, I don't put any money into it. Same thing's happening with the Photech cells. Here in Modesto, they're putting up regulations slowing you down about putting your roof with Photech cells. Now you have to go to them to get permission. That's how things starting to work out.
That's been going on for some time. I have that issue here. We wanted to do it, and then we found out how to do it. Was going to go through their whole licensing processing and their economic generation, interest-bearing banking.
Yeah, the individual in the article did have a few funny notions. He was, I think in one of the points, he was considering that nuclear power was a good thing as well. So I thought it was quite interesting that somebody like this individual who had a number of credentials after his name, who was obviously someone of renown, is seeing through the propaganda in regards to the demonizing of the carbon dioxide. And so although some of his points may be a bit not exactly in keeping or in alignment with the supporting of an all-natural environment through the use of these fossil fuels and these various pollutants and such, nevertheless, I thought it was quite interesting that he did have quite a few salient points, and also that it does show that, as I said, more and more people are beginning to see through the propaganda and this fake human-caused climate change nonsense, and definitely this demonizing of the carbon dioxide, which is the breath of life, because ultimately they want to get agreement as such with humanity's consciousness that they will more or less agree to be producing no carbon dioxide whatsoever. And the only way you can have a situation where anything living is not producing any carbon dioxide would be if it effectively wasn't alive anymore. And this then is building agreement for the robotisation of humanity. And so it's all like this is all part of their game to get the agreement towards greater restriction of the human species. So yeah.
If they on nuclear power, yeah, I think it would work if they went to cobalt-60. Cobalt-60 has a half-life of 5.9 years. The stuff they're using now has a half-life of 2 billion years. Who the hell would want to use that? So they, you know, those tubes, they wear out after about 10 years. So why the hell would you have something in there that takes 2 billion years to get a half-life? So what it means is a half-life means that in 6 years, every 6 years, it has half its power. So by about 50 years, the thing is decayed to where it's neutral, where it wouldn't affect anybody. It just amazes me that they use such the dirty stuff to make their powers with. When they can all they have to do is switch what they're using.
The following information was sourced from the site Exemplar and titled Tunguska-Tesla Theory. Did Tesla cause the Tunguska explosion? Written by Cryptid, June the 26th, 2020. With interests in science and nature, the author explores topics from a unique and sometimes controversial perspective. Did Tesla cause the Tunguska event? It is an interesting story, but it seems extremely unlikely. A far more plausible theory is that an asteroid or comet exploded in the atmosphere, causing massive destruction at ground level. So why do some people think Tesla could have been responsible for this mysterious blast? Nikola Tesla was a brilliant inventor and a scientist who lived at one of the most exciting times in history. In America, back in the late 19th century, it seemed new discoveries, inventions, and human achievements were coming along by the bucketful. The railroad had brought together the east and west coasts. Cities were building not only outward but upward, and something called electricity was beginning to creep into homes and towns around the country. Everyone knows Thomas Edison as the man behind the electric light bulb, but Edison had a protege in Nikola Tesla, who would eventually go on to become a competitor. Tesla is known today as a key developer of alternating current, the very power that runs our lives. But not all of Tesla's creations were so benign. Tesla's ultimate invention. There are those who say Nikola Tesla invented a superweapon. He called it a peace ray, but others refer to it as a death ray, and it is said to have been capable of horrific destruction. This weapon held the power to destroy entire armies and to completely annihilate targets halfway across the globe. Tesla himself claims to have built and tested such a superweapon in the twilight of his career, but by then he had become increasingly eccentric, some say to the point of madness. Tesla's involvement in many clandestine projects has long been speculated, from time travel in the Philadelphia experiment to an alleged earthquake machine, but the death ray would top them all. But if he really did create such a device, where is the proof? Some say a cataclysmic 1908 explosion in a remote Tunguska River region of Russia may be the evidence of Tesla's ultimate invention, the Tunguska explosion. When Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik first overlooked the site, he must have been stunned beyond words. Over 80 million trees demolished over a vast area greater than 2,000 square kilometers, blown down by some unknown force. They all lay in a pattern revealing an epicenter near the Tunguska River, but Kulik could find no crater, nor anything that appeared to be the landing spot of whatever had caused the explosion. Kulik was the first scientist to lead an expedition to the region, the site of the now famous explosion. He wasn't allowed access to the site until the 1920s, even though the event had occurred in 1908. Because of the delay in the investigation, and because it is such a remote location, there were few first-hand eyewitnesses who came forward. Those who did told a story of lights in the sky, balls of fire, and a tremendous blast that flattened everything in the area. It was as though some unearthly power had reached down and smashed the landscape. Whatever it was had been incredibly powerful, and if it had targeted a populated area such as a city, it would have inflicted catastrophic damage. A nuclear weapon is one of the few things that could conceivably cause such destruction, but the atom bomb hadn't even been invented yet. So what happened? What caused the Tunguska event? Modern science offers several explanations for the blast at Tunguska. An inbound projectile from space is the likely culprit. It may have entered Earth's atmosphere and exploded with tremendous force before reaching the ground, flattening trees for miles without leaving a crater. This is the most widely accepted theory, and it seems the most plausible. More bizarre reasons include UFOs, visitors from another planet who were perhaps attempting to create the ultimate crop circle. A black hole may have passed through the Earth, or even a chunk of antimatter. One explanation involves Nicola Tesla, and some believe the blast at Tunguska was the direct result of one of his experiments. His brilliant work with electrical power might not be enough to make him a suspect, but when looking at his career as a whole, the idea that he may have directed some sort of weapon at Tunguska begins to appear more plausible. What could Tesla have created that was capable of such power? The Warden Cliff Tower. One of Tesla's more infamous projects was the Warden Cliff Tower. The Warden Cliff Tower stood 187 feet tall and was located on Long Island, New York. Tesla envisioned it as both a means for facilitating worldwide wireless communication and as a method for delivering electrical energy over great distances. Tesla believed he could transmit both radio waves and electric power between continents without the need for wires. He proved this on a much smaller scale in his experiments using his famed Tesla coil. With the Warden Cliff Tower, he would show the results of his work to the world. The plan was to build similar towers in major cities around the world, enabling energy and information to be transferred from point to point. Unfortunately for Tesla, his financial backers left him before he could finish his work on the Warden Cliff Tower. The project was scrapped. The setback and stigma of a failure that surrounded it dealt a serious blow to Tesla and his self-esteem. Already reclusive and eccentric by nature, Tesla retreated further into the shadows. So, Tesla may have invented a system for transferring massive amounts of energy through the air over hundreds or thousands of miles. So far, this is interesting in theory, but what's the connection between Tesla and Tunguska? As the story goes, explorer Robert Peary was undertaking an expedition to the North Pole around the time of the Tunguska event. Tesla contacted him before the trip and asked him to report back on anything unusual he encountered. Did Tesla then fire a blast of energy at the uninhabited North Pole and miss, hitting Tunguska instead? Tesla's motivation. It seems extremely reckless, but Tesla's experiment may have been the act of a frustrated and desperate man. Tesla was a genius who never quite got the recognition he deserved. The financial backing for his work was drying up. He had a big chip on his shoulder from past failures, and this one may have put him over the edge. Was the Tunguska Blast Tesla's test of his system of wireless energy transfer? With the testimonial of Admiral Peary, whom hopefully he did not blow up during the experiment, Tesla could have proven his tower worth the investment, reclaimed the admiration of his benefactors, and continued with his work. It might sound unlikely if you consider Warden Cliff as a mere communication system, but there is another, more chilling scenario. There are those who claim there was a third use for Tesla's Warden Cliff Tower, to function as a death ray. Some say the Warden Cliff Tower was an operational super weapon and held the power to create massive amounts of destruction, with the alleged ability to transmit aimed blasts of energy. It's not a far stretch. In fact, Tesla claimed to have been working on a super weapon from 1900 until the time of his death. According to him, he did design and test such a device later in his career, a charged particle beam projector called Teleforce. To be clear, Teleforce, according to Tesla, was envisioned as a means of defense, never as an offensive weapon. He intended this death ray as protection and as a method for eliminating war altogether. It was just as often referred to as the peace ray. Nonetheless, Tesla's mechanism of delivering a charged particle beam allegedly held the power to wipe out entire armies and bring down 10,000 enemy aircraft at a distance of 200 miles. Teleforce, if it existed, was an incredible device with mind-boggling implications. These were the days before World War II, and had Tesla's invention been put into practice, thousands and thousands of lives would have likely been spared. Then again, had his technology gotten into the wrong hands, the dictator or despot who controlled it would have the world at his feet in a true supervillain style. So what happened to Teleforce? In a cryptic comment he allegedly made in 1937, Tesla responded to notions that Teleforce was purely in the concept stage by assuring his audience that he had indeed built and tested this super weapon. Was Tesla telling the truth? Was the test he alluded to the explosion at Tunguska? It's hard to sort it all out. Many believed by then that Tesla had begun to go off the deep end with his theories and claims. The fact that no government, including his, took an interest in Teleforce at the time or since is telling. However, Tesla also claimed he held the blueprint to Teleforce in his mind, so perhaps this explains why his alleged work was never reproduced. Did Tesla's death ray cause the Tunguska explosion? Nicola Tesla was one of the most intriguing inventors in history, and because of his eccentricities, he is often regarded as a kind of mad scientist. In truth, it's hard to imagine a world today without Tesla's creations. Tesla, after all, invented the alternating current power we take for granted. But what else may he have done? Was Tesla's Warden Cliff Tower a veiled attempt at a superweapon, an early application of the Teleforce death ray concept? Did he really have the power to blast away thousands of square kilometers of Russian wilderness. The internet is awash with conspiracy theories on his inventions, some perhaps still in development today. Most mainstream scientists say the event at Tunguska probably had nothing to do with Tesla. Still, some people continue to believe it was not only well within Tesla's ability to execute the blast that rocked Tunguska, but he also had the motivation to follow through. Unfortunately, one of the greatest inventors the world has ever known took this and many other secrets to his grave.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Tunguska, 1,000 times more powerful than an atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Well, we'll see if anything shows up with that. Our time is up, everybody. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ronald and Peter, for being here. This is the World Forest Report, January 4th, 2022. I'm Dean Bell. See you next week. New you. Peter?
You.
Ronald?
You.
And Kevin?
You.